This is David Sable, coming to you for New York Festival's Creativity from the Other Side. Today we are in re-energized Lower Manhattan. So all of you pundits who said New York was dead, not only is it not dead, New York is buzzing, it's amazing. New York Festivals is buzzing, and we're gonna talk about that. We're gonna talk about it with our guest today, David Justus, the Executive Director of Technology at AKQA North America, and we're gonna discuss with him about creativity from the other side. What makes creativity come from technology? What drives us in our business from technology to the creative side, and really, in my view, makes a huge difference. And David, you are a president of the Future Now category, which is a brand new category. We're gonna talk about that. You're the president of the executive jury. Technical officers from all over the world are gonna be joining you here to discuss the work, to talk about technology. But first, we wanna talk about you. Awesome. So AKQA, one of my favorite companies. I think everybody knows that I am a WPP person at heart. It's my spiritual home. AKQA was in my view, was one of the great acquisitions that WPP made. Has added huge value to the company, to their clients, to me as well. I've learned a ton from Ajas and the crew, so it's just a pleasure to have you here. But let's start talking about you first. Even before we get to AKQA, music drives you.
Yes, that's true.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Music drives you.
You know, it's funny you bring that up. It's
not funny.
You did your research, so it's very good stalking. I think I just grew up with music. Like both my parents were huge music heads. Everything from Floyd and Stones and Zeppelin and Yes and I think
they're like my generation.
Yeah, basically, yes, exactly. But I think I just always fell in love with it. And then there was, when I was growing up, I was very much into the learn how to play guitar to be in a rock band or whatever. And I think it resonated so well with the science and math side of my brain because good music is actually really complex and there's a lot of theory that goes into it. And I just sort of fell in love with it. And it's just the most pure creative expression of math, which is the other half of my life, right? Which is mathematics and computer science. And so I just always fell in love with it, and it just connects in an emotional way that I just, haven't felt in anything else, I guess.
So I love that. I love that notion of the math, of the technology, and the music coming together. And I think those of us who have studied a little bit about music, which I did when I was younger, know that musical theory is very close to math. Pandora, interestingly enough, is based on trying to understand the algorithm of the music behind the scenes, so deconstructing it so that we can look at music in different ways.
So you can figure out what's similar to other things, so then you can make recommendations because if you like this kind of stuff, you probably like this other stuff because
which is way better than, oh my God, he likes Yes, so probably likes Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, exactly.
Which most of the sites do, and that's sort of very basic and sort of obvious. So how though has the music, give me an example of how it's influenced an idea or a thought or something that you've looked at on the technical side and applied to some real world?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't know if there's a one-to-one correlation to it. When you're in
inspiration,
it's inspiration, right? And I think when you are coding or you're trying to solve a problem and being able to blast some music loudly and sort of let yourself get lost in it for a minute kind of frees your brain to be able to think about the problem in a different way, because you get, people get stuck in problems, right? It's you fixate on it and then you can't crack it because you can't look at it from a different way. And for me, when I listen to music, it lets me sort of disassociate a little bit, and then that gives me a new perspective on the problem, and I can be oh, wait a minute, actually maybe if I tackle it from this side, there'll be something more interesting that comes out of it. And then that's usually the great unlock, right? So I think for me, it's largely just a facilitator of, freedom of thinking in a lot of ways, right?
So I love that. So I'm just going to turn to our creative directors for a moment and just say, listen carefully to the tech guy who's using music to unlock his creativity. I think that's fabulous. I think that's a big thought and a big idea, and it gets back to the Pandora thing and the genome theory, whatever. But I think the notion of being able to creativity from the other side, to take your technology, to take your music, and then to turn it into to unlock bigger ideas is huge.
Well, and I agree, and I think like that is what creativity is, right? It's thinking about things in different ways, and it's thinking about non-traditional approaches to things, and that's what music is too, right? It's like interesting music isn't just, you know, a 1/4 like a simple, you know, pop riff over and over. You need something interesting in there that's unexpected. And
so then here, I wanted you to take that just a little more.
Sorry.
We're just gonna push the music a little bit more. So Pink Floyd, one of your favorites.
This is one of my favorites.
Now move to a contemporary band that's another one of your favorites.
Tricot.
Tricot.
Yep.
Don't judge a book by its cover, because I think if anybody ever went and saw the Tricot video and didn't listen to the music, they would pass it by thinking this is just some Japanese pop music. When you listen to it, you're like, oh my God, this is like serious, good rock and roll.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because they both have the same underlying thing, right? Which is they're in a category, right, that you would expect to be a certain way, and then they look at it very differently. And so like Tricot is a really prime example. A lot of people consider them math rock, right, which is a genre of music that's around non-traditional time signatures, polyrhythms, like really complex compositions. But they themselves are like, no, we're just a pop band who wants to make interesting music, right? And so I think when you look at those things, you're like, oh, that's a really fascinating thing, like that. Even though they are technically this other thing, they don't actually identify as that because they just want to make good, interesting things, right? And I think Pink Floyd's a very similar way. Like when they grew up, you know, they always found new ways of using technology, using, you know, synths and whatnot to basically push that rock genre into a whole different direction than like, you know, other contemporary bands at the time were doing.
I love it. So let's move to AKQA. So AKQA says we exist to create the future. Experience, design. You also do ads, to be fair. But let's get back to
it's experience.
It's experience. Let's get back to this. We exist to create the future. I'm your client. I exist to sell something 5 minutes from now.
Sure.
How do you bring those two things together?
Yeah, I think when we say we exist to create the future, part of that also means like, what are the things that you should be selling, right? And I think a lot
of that. That's great. Okay. Go down that path too. That's important. Don't lose that thought.
Yeah, well, I won't. You know, I think when we think about how people are changing their behaviors, right, that fundamentally changes what businesses need to do, right? Because whether a company likes it or not, they influence culture for sure, but at the same time, culture influences them. And so, you know, a lot of what we really try to do is help figure out like, not what do you need to be doing today, but what should you be doing tomorrow and driving that. And so when you think about, to that point about, you know, what should you be selling? It's sort of like, well, consumer expectations and behaviors and trends are changing. How do you stay relevant in the future? And so thinking about industries like healthcare, right? It's a big industry, it's close to my heart because, you know, it's like you're actually doing something to save people's lives. That's always nice. Like
it is.
It's it's a really laggard industry from a technology and consumer experience perspective. And you're looking at Amazon and Google and Apple and blah, blah, blah moving into the space. And you're like, in order for these huge healthcare companies who are driving true value to people to remain sort of competitive and relevant, they have to think more about how are they engaging the patient? How are they creating a more holistic health picture? And so like that is the future for healthcare, right? And you can apply that to any industry, whether you're talking about finance, automotive, and, you know, the emergence of, you know, car shares. What does that mean? Like if people aren't no longer necessarily buying and owning cars, what does that mean to a car manufacturer, right? How does that change your business? And so these are all the kinds of problems and challenges that we like to sort of tackle and work with our clients on.
So at the top of David Justus's 10 Commandments is don't make weird stuff. What does that mean?
Well, I should say I like making weird stuff. Weird stuff is okay. I think it's about making stuff that has a purpose though, right? And like the issue you run into technology, right, is it's sort of like, it's the hype curve, right? And everyone's like, oh, metaverse is a prime example right now, right? Where everybody and their mother is talking about, we need to have a metaverse experience because that's the future. And you're like, but cool, but like, what does that mean for your business? Like, what is going to be something that's going to actually drive value and make consumers or just people go, oh, that's really cool and that's really interesting, versus sort of like just making a cool 3D thing that is irrelevant in 3 months' time because the next cool 3D thing has come out. And so I think for me, it's very much about that. It's like weird is perfectly fine as long as there's a purpose behind it and a reason behind it.
So in the example that you gave, I don't mean to catch on this, but you wrote it, so I'm just coming up, was don't make weird stuff, and you used the Lemmings example from Apple as sort of being useless versus the previous piece, which was 1984, which was brilliant.
Right.
In your view.
Right.
Why did you think one was useless?
Yeah.
And one was kind of weird and useless, and the other one wasn't?
Yeah. So
that's a great way just to frame your thinking.
Yeah. I think because the 1984 one, there was a clear statement that was being made that resonated with the culture at the time, right? If you think about personal computers in the 80s and sort of what was happening in market, like there was a really clear purpose and it really clearly defined what Apple was trying to achieve and do. I think with the Lemmings one, it just seemed to be like, okay, well, that was successful and it was a little strange, so let's just like double down on that without going back to the core truth of like what was happening in market. And again, this is just my perspective. I wasn't even alive for the first one of those spots, so like, who the heck am I to have you know what I mean? They say opinions are like buttholes. Everyone has one, right?
No, but that's fine. We want to hear your opinion. This is great to hear from the side man. We need to hear what you have to say. It's important.
Yeah, but yeah, I think that's why, and I think you see that a lot where there's a creative spark or a strategic spark that drives something, and it makes an amazing creative piece, and then somebody then tries to replicate that for the mere sake of replicating it. And then it falls flat because it's lost the meaning behind it.
So let's come back to the metaverse for a second. I wasn't going to go down there.
Yeah, but I brought it up.
And you brought it up, so I'm just going to go down there for a second. But I think you're right. The first question always is, we all had this back in, Second World, Second Life back in the day. I had clients who put in millions of dollars to create stuff. And like, where's that money today? Who knows? We have a company that just changed its name to Meta. I thought, when I first heard it, it was Megla, which I thought actually spoke to who they were. And I found out it was Meta.
It's apropos,
I said, wait, what does that mean? That's got nothing to do with what Megla would have been a great name. And we can talk about their sad logo another time.
The little infinity loop,
But except I don't know if you noticed, but it kind of droops. And so I can't figure that one out. But
I don't know. It's a weird logo.
It's a weird logo, weird name. But anyways, let's move on. So, in the metaverse, part of the issue of the metaverse is that if they're really, if there's one metaverse, which is what Facebook is trying to say, which is great, then Fortnite is connected to Roblox, is connected to Zoom, is connected to AKQA in the future, and connected to everything else. But it's not. So I got Fortnite here is a metaverse maybe.
Sure.
Roblox says they're a metaverse, so that's over here, and certainly the hype in our industry is that it is. You've got whatever over here. Can each one of those be and then you have, of course, the Marvel verse, which is which is my favorite.
I agree with that. That's my favorite as well.
So the question is, how does that? You're the future guy. Is that ever going to come together? Is there ever going to be one metaverse? Should I be? Is that what I should be thinking about?
Sure. So a few things on that, right? I think one is no and yes, and I say that because John Carmack, which I don't know if you're familiar with, he's the consulting CTO of Oculus, but he's also a guy who made Doom, and brilliant engineer. But he came out recently when Meta rebranded as Meta, saying that it's kind of wrong to think that there'll be one controlling entity that will run the metaverse, right? Because it's he used the term, I think, astronaut engineers, where it's you can look at it from 20,000 feet away and you're like, yeah, we can make these things. But when you actually get into practice, it's not practical to do that. And it doesn't make even sense from just how consumer behavior is, right? And so I think for me, this is just personal opinion, when you think about the metaverse, it's basically just the evolution of the internet. Right. I mean, the internet is arguably a metaverse. Yeah, there's no cool 3D avatars, but you have a digital identity that is distributed and you can connect with other people. That is fundamentally what the construct of a metaverse is. And so I think it's just the evolution of all of that. And so there won't be one Uber metaverse. It'll be a series of different things that are connected in different ways and have a certain degree of interoperability between those things, but it's still going to be like different things run by different people. And that's also how you get creativity. And it's how you get, if one thing runs something, it gets stagnant pretty quick, right? And so, I think thinking about it as the one true thing that's run by Meta or Microsoft or Apple or whoever, like, is just not how it's going to play out in the end, because it's just not how human behavior is.
Good. So let's go back to your rules.
Yep.
So we talked about this notion of don't create useless weird things.
Sure. Yeah.
You need to go back.
I need to change. I need to revisionist history. Yeah.
No, but I think it was great. I understood what you meant though when you said it. Obviously, we're the weird thing. It's part of our business. But useless weird things. You also talked about cringe-worthy advertising.
Sure.
And work. Like, you got to stay away from the cringe-worthy. What is cringe-worthy to you? What does that mean?
So
I think we all have our own cringe-worthy.
Sure. Yeah. I think it's the example that one of the examples that I always think about, and it happens a lot in advertising, is when you think about personalization, and you think about using somebody's data to then create like targeted information. To me, like, that can get cringeworthy, because like, if I'm a user didn't knowingly disclose certain information, and then I get like weird messaging about it, like, it just sends a bad feeling and feels sort of weird. Or like, if you aren't considering the cultural circumstances in which something's being presented, like we all know the Pepsi ad a few years back, right? And it was like, you have to understand cultural context. And again, I think this is the whole problem. And this is
the one where they totally didn't.
Right, yes, that one. Yes, it was a lovely ad. Hopefully that gets taken in context. But I think it comes to really like getting out of your echo chamber, right? And we do this in advertising, we do this in technology, we do it everywhere, right? It's like, you have your cohort of people, and there's always the joke that like Google makes great products for Google, right? But like, what about the other people in the world, right? And I think it's really important that you have to think about who are the people that you don't deal with every day, and like, how do they react to these things, and how are they going to feel about whatever it is you're doing, again, whether it's using your data to create hyper-targeted ads or creating a spot about sharing Pepsi or whatever.
So it's interesting that you use that example of hyper-targeting. The late Lester Wonderman, who created Wonderman, he was the father of direct marketing, probably the first person to think about actually how did the scientific use of data in direct marketing, in response marketing, in branded response, all those things. I had the privilege and honor to work for him and with him for many years. He was my mentor, passed away a couple of years ago, amazing man. Another WPP agency now called Wonderman Thompson. Lester always said, it's interesting that when the hyper-targeting first started, so I'm not even talking about the hyper-targeting online, but even just our ability to create better targeting through CRM and through printed material and stuff, he talked about a letter, and he saved it, a letter that had come from an insurance company to a woman who had passed away a year before to their family, saying, oh, you owe us on your thing, and we want to sell you more life insurance.
Right.
And it was clear that to them, they thought they had done the greatest job at targeting.
Right.
And the family was distraught.
Right, of course.
And Lester saved this always to show, and I remember he showed it once at a big meeting at Microsoft, and said, this is your challenge.
Yeah.
This is what it's all about.
Yep.
I think you might remember when CRM first started, like in the early 2000s, when it really became a thing. So all of a sudden, companies that had done really good jobs of personalization, like they'd say, send Dear David, so now all of a sudden, they buy this great software. The software sucks up all these data fields, but nobody checked to see where the data fields were.
Yep.
So the Dear David letter became Dear David Sable,
right?
Which was far from being personalized,
right,
and was clear just a suck up of data that nobody had
actually thought about
and thought about what it actually meant. And I think we still have that issue today.
Yes, we do. And like, I think that example you give is perfect, and it's amazing because of however many years ago that was. That still happens today. Like, there was the Target example a few years ago where they were sending like targeted CRM for, I think, like for expectant mothers, and it went to somebody whose daughter didn't tell their parents that she was expecting because they're able to use social media to figure out certain trends. And you're like, that's a huge faux pas, right? And I think the problem is, and you hit at the core truth, is like, for all of this stuff, right? It's only as good as the data that you have, and it's only as good as you are actually actioning and thinking about that data. And I think there's a a perception is like, oh, we can grab all the data and we'll do all these amazing things, but you're like, but bad stuff in is bad stuff out. And you have to be really conscious about that to make sure that you're building things, and I don't want to get into like ethical AI or any of that space, but you have to be thinking about those things, because it only takes one instance of, an expectant, mother to get a thing that exposes her to her parents for a brand to look really, really bad.
And it comes back to what you said, the word useless,
right?
Which is something that Lester talked about all the time, about the notion of useless data. Like you think about it the same way, so think about what you're doing, think about what you're doing, why you do it, who you're doing it for.
Right.
And how you use it is the same thing we talked about. All right, so before we get and start talking about the festival, let's talk specifically about a piece of work from AKQA
Sure.
that you love, you would love to share. It's neither useless nor cringeworthy, but something that is good to share with all of us. It could be the Sunspring AI, Nike jerseys, anything else you like.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, a lot of stuff I've done at AKQA I'm fairly proud of, which is probably why I've been there the longest of any other place in my career.
It is a great place.
It is a good place, yeah, and it's good people, and that's so important. But anyway, I would say one of the things that I really enjoy, and I kind of mentioned it earlier, some of the healthcare work that we've done. And, we work with Hospital for Special Surgery, which is a New York-based healthcare group, musculoskeletal health. And we help them reimagine their patient platform and help think about, as people are going through care and as people are needing, go into surgery, pre-surgery, post-surgery, all that, how do we ease that burden of like, what do you need to do for rehab? How are you tracking your stats? How are you, improving? And I think like being able to create technology and software that helps in that way is just, it's might sound a little bit boring from like, there's no cool creative AI or no stuff. We have done stuff in AI, but I just can't talk about it, which I would probably pick normally, but you're helping people. And at the end of the day, if you're doing something that's adding like this is going to get me on a soapbox, so I apologize, but like there's so much crap in this world today, right? And I think when I was a Droga, that was always one of the things that like David Droga always says, like, don't put crap into the market, right? Like there's so much of that already, don't worry about it. And so I think like with that is like, this is helping drive a net positive. And as long as if I'm doing something that's driving a positive into the world, then like, that's one small grain of sand in the grand scheme of us all trying to do good things. So
I love it. So let's go to the New York festivals.
Yep.
You're president of the Future Now category, new category.
Yes.
So I've been president of new categories before.
Sure.
It's always a challenge. It's always interesting. What is the category? Explain it to everyone.
Sure.
And what should we be looking for? What should we be thinking about?
Yeah. So the category really is around, how are brands using technology, emergent technology in new and interesting ways, right? And I think going back to the whole construct of like, don't put useless stuff in there. It's sort of like, you see that in advertising too. It's like, there are agencies who have done a really good job at figuring out when does an NFT make sense? And like, how do we add value to that? When does, blockchain make sense? When does AR, VR make sense? And then there are others who are just like, cool, we'll just like execute cool VR thing. And they all kind of get thrown into the, award submissions as a bucket, but they're very rarely judged on the merit of the technology and the application of it. And so Future Now technology thing really came out of that conversation that, I had with some of the festival team. And it was just like, how do we judge things based off the merit of the value that they're driving, and thinking about technology in new and interesting ways that are moving the space forward, right?
Not because I can use it,
because
but
I should
use it.
Exactly.
Good.
Exactly.
I love it.
Yeah. So that really is the impetus of it. And it really is around like, giving a space for those kinds of things that might get overlooked in other things because, there isn't an amazing film piece that goes with it, or it wasn't part of some larger campaign, but giving those a space to thrive and people to recognize like, oh, this is really cool. And selfishly, it's in the hopes that people can sort of be like, oh, this is what good stuff looks like in this case. How do we do more of it? Right. And then we can proliferate it better into the market.
And I imagine you're excited to see your jury.
Yes.
Peers from it. Did you know everyone? Have you met new people?
Yeah, I've not met everyone yet, but will be really exciting too. I think, when you get a bunch of technologists and technology first people in a room, it's just always as fun because everyone has sort of crazy ideas. And I think I'm really looking forward to just like riffing and sort of getting everyone's perspective on stuff. Because the other thing with all of this technology is there is no right or wrong right now because nobody's figured it out yet.
Right.
So I think it'll be really fun to sort of see what everyone's perspectives are and how we come to consensus on, what is good, what isn't good, and how that moves forward.
Good, David. This has been amazing.
Yes.
Thank you
Likewise.
so much. I've so enjoyed talking to you.
Likewise.
Everything that you said resonated with me, and I imagine resonates with everyone who's listening. Cool. So I'm just going to quickly recap.
Yep.
Listening to David Justus, don't make useless things.
Yes.
Right? Don't make useless weird things. So weird is almost a word we don't need here. Just don't make things that are useless. And if you're thinking about technology, you're not going to win an award, is what I'm hearing from you, as you might in other award festivals, because it's cool and like you've used technology and it's really what. But if that technology doesn't add value to the outcome, to the people, to the person that it's targeted to, don't bother to enter it.
Yep.
But think about the stuff that is adding value, that is using the technology the right way, that is thinking about what does the future look like, create for the future.
Exactly.
So I think that's important. Don't make cringeworthy stuff.
Yep.
Or as Droga said, don't make bad stuff.
Don't put crap into market.
Don't put crap in the market. I love that. Don't put crap in the market.
I hope I'm not misquoting him. He'll yell at me if I have, but
that's okay, David. David, I made him say that, but it's fine. No, but I respect David tremendously. And he's right. Don't put crap in the market because we don't want to. So I think when you think about David Justus's rules of creativity, it really is creativity from the other side.
Yep.
Bringing technology to bear, bringing music in to the process, and making things that are important.
Yep.
I think that's amazing. So thank you so much for being with me today.
No worries.
For sharing your thoughts. It was really wonderful. And you are now FOD, friend of David, which I hope you don't mind. It's
perfect. Us Davids, we got to stick together.
Exactly. It's the only thing we have. And to everyone who's watching and listening, this is David Sable coming to you from Lower Manhattan. Exciting Lower Manhattan. For New York festivals, get your entries in. For this category in particular, think about it. Think about the technology you've used. Think about how you've added value to your proposition, to your client's value proposition with technology, how you've made your creativity that much better. And that's what creativity from the other side is all about. So once again, David Justus, thank you. AKQA, one of my favorite companies, spent a lot of time working with them. Tell Aja as I say hello.
We'll definitely do.
And we look forward to seeing you again in our next session. Thank you all.
Thanks.